I still remember the exact moment I first stepped into that house as his wife. It was a rainy October afternoon in 2001. The front door creaked like it hadn't been opened for welcome in years. I was 32, carrying a single suitcase, and the kind of quiet hope that comes after too many years of being nobody's first choice. He was 48, widowed for 7 years, with 3 sons who looked at me like I was a temporary guest who'd forgotten to leave. His first wife, Elena, had died of breast cancer at 41. The boys were 9, 12, and 15 when she left. They never forgave the universe for taking her, so they turned that anger sideways, toward him for not crying loudly enough at the funeral, toward life for moving on, and later, toward me for existing in the space she used to fill. I understood. I didn't try to compete with a ghost. I just made sure there was always fresh coffee in the morning, clean towels in the bathroom, and silence when they needed it. We met through work. I was the junior analyst who stayed late reorganizing files nobody else touched. He was the CEO who noticed. One night he found me at 10 p.m. color-coding old contracts. He didn't say much, just asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. That became our ritual: late-night tea, spreadsheets, and conversations about everything except what hurt most. When we married 2 years later, it was small. No white dress, no big party. Just a judge, 2 witnesses, and a promise we both meant. I thought time would soften things with the boys. I was wrong. I learned their birthdays by heart. I remembered the eldest, Marcus, hated mushrooms. The middle one, Daniel, collected vintage vinyl and needed the house quiet on Sundays. The youngest, Liam, was terrified of thunderstorms. I kept the hallway light on those nights even after he said he was too old for that. I never asked for credit. I just did it. Then the diagnosis came. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 18 months if we were lucky. We weren't. I became his full-time shadow. Hospital runs at 3 a.m. for sudden pain spikes. Endless calls to specialists who spoke in percentages instead of hope. Nights when he couldn't sleep, I read him old business articles aloud because the sound of my voice calmed him more than morphine. His sons came for the big moments, birthdays, Christmas, the occasional weekend, but the small, ugly hours, those were mine. One night, 3 months before the end, he woke up gasping. I held his hand while the nurse adjusted the oxygen. When she left, he turned to me, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks. "I should have protected you better," he whispered. "They'll come for everything when I'm gone. The company, the name, the life we built. Don't let them take it all." He told me about 1998. His first partner had stolen half the company in a hostile buyout while he was grieving. Alana, he'd rebuilt from nothing once. He swore he'd never be that vulnerable again. So he created layers, psychological ones. He let everyone believe power was in the voting shares, in the CEO title, in the family name on the building. But the real heart, the patents that powered every major client contract, the licensing streams that quietly generated 87% of the revenue, the dormant holding company he'd set up in 2004, he tied those to something different. Not blood, continuity, competence. The person who actually understood the documents. The one who'd read every line, every footnote for 23 years. That was me. He made me promise I wouldn't fight loudly. "Let them think they've won," he said. "Then do what needs doing." The night the will was read, 100% voting shares, operating companies, the name, everything to the children to carry forward the legacy they celebrated in the executive suite with champagne and cigars. I sat alone in his old study, surrounded by the books he loved and the faint smell of his aftershave, still clinging to the chair. My hands shook as I opened the folder he'd shown me in secret 6 months earlier. By 2:17 a.m., with 3 people who'd known us longer than any of the boys had cared to, we moved the arteries. The core licensing agreements got new signatories. The most valuable patents were assigned to the 2004 holding company, sole director, me. Side letters, dated and witnessed, activated change of control provisions nobody had ever noticed. Quiet, legal, final. The next morning at 8:45, Marcus strode in to sign his CEO contract. The receptionist smiled sweetly. "I'm afraid the board meeting has been rescheduled, sir. The new chair called an emergency session." He laughed. "Who's the new chair?" I walked in wearing the charcoal suit he'd once joked about. "One day you might need to look like the boss." I hadn't laughed then. I understood now. "I am," I said. The silence was louder than any shout. They screamed breach, undue influence, conspiracy. Their lawyers spent 6 months and millions trying to unwind it. They failed. Every document carried his signature, his protection, his final act of trust in the woman who never asked for the spotlight. They kept the shell, the logo, the glass tower that echoed when empty, the title chairman that meant nothing without revenue. I kept what breathed, the licenses, the IP stream, the contracts that paid salaries and kept lights on. A year later, their company announced layoffs. The stock tanked. They sold the Malta Beach house to cover legal bills. I never said a word against them. Never posted, never gloated. I just continued. Some nights, in the small apartment they called my consolation prize, I pour a single glass of his favorite 18-year-old scotch. I set it on the table across from the empty chair where he used to sit, reading reports while I made tea. I lift my glass, eyes stinging, voice thick. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did, for teaching me that love doesn't need to be loud, for trusting me with the pieces when the board was already set against me. I miss him every single day, but I carry him forward, not in anger, not in revenge, but in the quiet, steady life we've protected together. And that, I think, is the only throne worth sitting on."